Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Bernt-Santy, and you all know that I love Exchange Press, and so I'm very excited to have one of their authors, one of their new books, on the show today. It's Nancy Rosenow. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Heather. So happy to be here.
So I made them at NACCE when I was in the exchange booth when we were at the conference. I made them give me a free copy of your book.
Good, good.
So I have really been enjoying it. Um, so I'm gonna eventually let you just talk about the book, but I want to start with just this reading from it. So the book is called Encouragement Every Day, and it's just kind of that. Every day you have a little piece that you've written, a one-page piece that is on some sort of kind of encouraging topic, and you also start each piece with a quote. So so
Always.
there's some symmetry here. So this is from January 13th. The page is or the entry is called Cultivate Joy. You start with a quote from Deepak Chopra. The past is gone. The future is not here. Now I'm free of both. Right now I choose joy. And then what you wrote. New York Times bestselling author Mary Pfeiffer, in an article published in Exchange magazine, wrote this about cultivating joy in life. It's never too late to become a happy person. We can set our mind to it and work to acquire the necessary skills. They are gratitude, slowing down, being awake to the wonder all around us, being outside and enjoying the primal activities we humans have enjoyed since the beginning of time. These skills can become healthy habits, just like brushing our teeth or exercising. Closing that quote. And then you write, it's interesting to think of choosing joy as a healthy habit, but I know this to be true. Each day is a new beginning and another chance to do things that lead to joy. For me, it's especially helpful to focus on gratitude and to spend meaningful time in nature. Today, I'm claiming my right to be a happy person. Feeling joy is a choice I make today. This really resonated with me because of that, claiming my right to be a happy person. And it's part of what I really love about this book, because it's no secret that people working with young children are, feeling burned out and discouraged and stressed. And there's a lot of conversations about self-care. And I feel like every page of this that I've, interacted with so far, can be used to sort of meet them where they are. And this idea of choosing joy, and claiming your right to be happy fits in with that.
Well, the way that this book came about was during the pandemic, I was the one that was putting together Exchange Every Day that comes out 5 times a week. And on Mondays, I said, I'm going to step, out from behind the curtain and be a little more personal, because we're all in this together. And I'm going to write something encouraging every Monday because I need it. And I think you might too.
Yeah.
And so I just started doing that and just kept doing that. And when I announced that I was retiring, and I'm retired, but I'm still doing an awful lot of consulting and different things. I'm still connected, but I'm not doing the day-to-day right now. And people wrote to me and said, oh, we're going to miss that encouraging word, darn. And we got to talking at Exchange. They said, well, you could just write one for every day and put it into a book. So that's what I did. And I said, I think I'm writing it for myself as much as anybody, but just sharing together. I kind of like to think of all of us that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, one of the pieces of advice that I've heard writers being given is write the book you want and need. Like, what is it that you need yourself, and put that out into the world. And that's
yeah, there's a quote, that says that, if there's a book out there that you've always wanted to read, but it's not out there, you better write it yourself, to paraphrase. And that's sort of what I did. I thought, yeah. So
yeah. So I guess what you kind of answered this already, but what do you hope happens with this book out in the world? Like what's your vision?
Let me tell you. Can I step back for a minute and tell you sort of, because some of my background, I think, will help you know where I'm coming from on
yes,
this.
and I said I was going to let you say that, and I didn't.
I'm going to just tell you anyway, because I think it has everything to do with the book. So I started out in early care and education myself, working directly with children.
Mhm.
And then I became a program director, and it was a very small program. And we just developed a wonderful community together of early care and education professionals. And over the years, we just kept learning and discovering together, and started doing some research, had a National Science Foundation grant. Teachers became co-researchers, took some graduate classes in qualitative research. Anyway, to make a long story short, we grew into the Dimensions Educational Research Foundation. We created our Nature Explorer program, where we're creating natural outdoor classrooms all over the country. And then when Bonnie and Roger Negebauer decided that they were ready to sell Exchange, they kept asking me, and at first I wasn't ready. Oh gosh, but then I thought, oh, what a great opportunity. I love Exchange magazine so much. I love book, and we could publish any book we wanted, and all the things I've ever believed about early childhood. We could, I'm very proud of things like Illuminating Care of
Yeah.
Carol Bodenward, and the Whole Child Alphabet, and just new ways
Yes.
of thinking. Our whole Row collection, and
Mhm.
that was just such a labor of love, being able to do that. And so one of the things I learned early in my career, but really the longer I've been in it, is I'm such a believer that if we work with young children, our first work is with ourselves.
Mhm.
And, I like to think of early childhood professionals as sort of developmentalists and guides,
Yeah.
and I don't even like to use the word teacher anymore,
Right.
personally.
Me
Because
neither.
it implies, you're right, it implies that the academics, if you want to use that
Yeah.
term, are everything. And to me, that's complete opposite of what it
Mhm.
is. I really, like to think that it's that respect for the child, and we're all fellow human beings together. We've just had more experience than they have
Yeah.
in the world, so we sort of serve as guides for them. But to do that, I mean, we're role models. They're looking at us, and if unhappy people are serving as guides for our children, that's
Yeah.
not going to be good for anyone.
Yeah.
Really, so much. What I started to realize as I'd always have weekly meetings with, our community of folks that work
Mhm.
with children, and we would have such rich, deep discussions. And it really came down to, gosh, it's working with ourselves. It's all of our attitudes about learning, and all of our attitudes about life, and really coming to the realization that exactly what you read, it really is a choice. A lot
Mhm.
of it is a choice. If we claim our right to be happy, if we um, just so many things. And over the years, I've always been a collector of quotes, I think, because I feel like, well, that's what's happened for us. That's why I love books so much. People
Yeah.
have been guides for us. They've been
Yes.
gracious enough to write things down to tell us about their experience. So I thought, I don't have all the answers for everybody. I'm just telling you what has been helpful to me. And
Yeah.
as I said, some things will maybe be helpful to you too, and some won't, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But I'm sharing a lot of what's been helpful to me, or what I've learned from other people.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
basically, it's a way that I wanted the message to be, I think that the work you do is some of the most important in the world. I value the work of early childhood
Mhm.
so much, and this is a gift to you that I hope will give you a little spark every day, and you can remind yourself, that what you're doing is so important, and
Yeah.
that there are ways we, can support ourselves and keep growing. So we're excited about life. If we're going to work with young children, that's what I think. It's our responsibility to be people that are excited about life.
For sure. Yeah. And I've been, and you may have heard me mention this on other episodes, but I've been really struggling with this response that I get more and more frequently lately when I talk about the good things children deserve. And the response back to me is, well, you can't expect struggling, underpaid, stressed out teachers to be able to do all of that.
I
I don't agree. Like, I think if you
totally
take the
disagree.
job, you should I'm not saying don't feel your feelings or whatever, but I did the work for a long time making like $8 an hour with two young kids and all kinds of trauma of my own. And there are hard days, but I just assumed that when I took the job, I made a commitment to.
Yeah, and I mean, I as a young director was going through a divorce with two young kids too, and I mean,
Mhm.
it was, yes, a lot of challenges, but and you know, early on, I think it's all in your attitude. Early on,
Mhm.
as a young director, people said, "Oh, you're going to lose 40% of your staff a year, and you're going to have all
Yeah.
kinds of problems with parents, and on and on and on." And I just decided at some point, I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay. And honestly, we did a lot of things over the years so that we got grants and did different things and were able to pay better, which I think, you know, you never want to not try to continue to
Absolutely.
pay better. So
Yes.
that's, I just want to say that.
Yes, I
But
absolutely know that they deserve to be paid
yes,
better.
but before I could, I thought, okay, what can I do if I can't right now increase the pay? And it was that sense of deep support,
Mhm.
respect. Um, I'll tell you something that's been just a joy for me. A number of retired teachers who I'd worked with through the years, and I've gotten together and we've decided we really want to do something to support the younger teachers who've been through the pandemic, and it was so hard.
Oh.
So we go in, we call it Roots and Wings. So
Uh-huh.
it's the roots of some of the things we've learned, but then they're the wings of the new ideas. And so four retired teachers go in and take teachers groups for an hour, and they've been meeting with me, and we've been having discussions, and it is so exciting to see when teachers have that support. One of the young women said, "Oh, I was at a party the other day and someone asked me what I did, and I just started talking on and on about how important this work was and how fun it is." And he
Yeah.
said, "I had no idea that early
Yeah.
career education could be that important. And I wish I loved my job as much as you love
Yeah.
yours." And
Yeah. Oh, I
there,
get that a lot.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I think a lot of what I write about in the book is we get to choose our attitude. We
Hmm.
really do. I'm not saying don't feel your feelings. I'm not into the toxic positivity,
Hmm.
but it really is a choice. And there is so much that's so interesting about the work. And if you really develop relationships among staff, people who work together, if
Hmm.
you develop relationships with parents, you know, it can be just such great work. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even though the people I was working with were going through the pandemic and it was hard, it wasn't insurmountably hard. You know, there
Hmm.
was a lot of support. So, you know, I am not a huge believer in, oh, all is lost and it's, you know, we're doomed to have, you know,
Yeah.
I think we have more control over things than we think we do.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I hope so. And
Well,
I sure think it's also the way I try to like talk to my students
yeah,
when so many of them are already working in early childhood, and have these frustrations that they bring to our conversations. Um, I've started reading whatever day it is from Encouragement Every Day at the beginning of class.
oh, that makes me
These
so
8 weeks.
happy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And it's the first week, I read whatever day that was, and I said, what does this have to do with child growth and development, which is the topic of this class? And the first week they really kind of struggled, and the second week were making more connections. And even though it does, because they're like, well, it doesn't explicitly talk about children in that one,
right.
but how could we
And
connect
most of
it?
them don't, but
Yeah.
you know, really, again, it's sort of what I believe is we have such a responsibility, you know, to keep
Hmm.
working on ourselves. If we're going to be these guides for children,
Yeah.
then, you know, what kind of messages do we want to give them about life?
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's so fun with when the teachers have been meeting with the retired teachers, and they
Mhm.
go back into the classroom, the children all know that they're going in and they're learning, and they'll say to them, "What'd you learn today? What'd you talk about today?" And I think that's just such a great message. And
Yeah.
I used to bring in to my groups of children, I used to bring in books I was reading, not that they were going to read them, but they saw that I love books.
Right. Yes.
They saw, and I would talk about what I loved. And what really concerns me is
Mhm.
if we have people working with children who are feeling very depressed or, just very down about life,
Mhm.
that's really not, that's not what we want to have happen. And
Yeah.
what can we do to lift folks up and support them and help them remember, what really is good about life?
Mhm.
And we still have an awful lot of things that are really, they're challenging, but we have really, I always say it's an and world.
Ah.
And somebody, I'm not a big techie person. I started exchange, said you could do a little Facebook page about the book, and I said, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. You're doing
But
great. I'm
oh well,
following
I'm
it. You're
just
doing great.
trying. But they said just write personal stuff. So I was like, "Oh, okay." But thank you. I'm just learning. But somebody wrote me the other day, and she said, "Oh yeah, it is an and world. Working with children can be very challenging, and it's also so inspiring." And I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. It's an
Yeah.
and world.
Yeah. I just recorded, maybe it was yesterday, with Carol Garbo Murray, um, who everybody knows I love
Yeah, yeah, I do
and
too.
am
I
inspired
was just,
by.
I was just like, I can't wait to get this book out in the world. And so,
Yes.
yeah,
And we were talking about, it eventually became a conversation about professional love, but it started with this idea of romanticized childhood. And I
mhm.
think that sometimes feeds the frustration for teachers when they go in and they think children are angels and children are magic and children are, just this heavenly being, and then they're not.
They're
And
human
that can be
beings. They're
very
fellow. Yeah,
stressful for us. So
yeah,
some
yeah.
of that choosing our response or whatever, and reflecting on ourselves, and maybe involves, what was our idea of the child when we came in. And
Yes. And conversations that I have a lot is about, what happened to us as children and
mhm.
how do things that happen with young children now trigger that. So one person was sharing the other day that she was always instructed immediately to say you're sorry, say you're sorry.
Yeah.
And she said, I know intellectually that's not what I'm doing with children, and I know why we're not doing that,
Yeah.
and why, but there's a part of me that if they don't express remorse right away, I'm just triggered by that. And I
Yeah.
realized it was because of my childhood, and I have to
Mhm.
go back and work with that little kid inside of me and say, hey, you know it's okay, things are different,
Yeah.
we have new information,
Yeah.
on and on. You know how much our own
Yeah.
personal, and if teachers
Absolutely.
aren't aware of that, I
Mhm.
think it's all happening unconsciously, and it makes it harder to have it's honestly,
Yeah.
relationships with children are no different than any relationships in our
Right.
lives, and relationships are take work.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I have become less comfortable talking about early childhood education and using the word teacher, even though I use it still a lot. Um,
We need a better word. I
we
don't know
do need a
exactly
better
what it
word,
is,
and
but yeah.
practitioner doesn't really roll off the tongue. I've seen that one too, but one of the oh, I just forgot. Oh, because it's just very clinical, and it doesn't allow for that
Right.
relationship focus. Um, and that work that we're trying to do with ourselves, because we have to get past this teacher ego and this
Yeah,
identity of
yeah,
myself as a professional respected teacher, whatever, all these fights we've been having for
oh
ourselves that
yeah,
go in wrong directions.
yeah. And things are so cyclical.
Yeah.
I've been in the field long enough to know all the things. I mean, we were talking about the importance of play, and
Yeah.
that we're developmentalist, and since I was 20 or 23, or whenever I started in the field. And
Hmm.
I just, and maybe that's it. Someone said, well, every generation has to feel like they're discovering something new and to make it really
That's true,
theirs.
yeah.
I mean, isn't that what we say with
Yeah.
children? They have to discover it for
Yeah,
themselves to make it
yeah.
really theirs. And maybe that's okay that it keeps going around. But here's what I'm really concerned about. When I see early childhood people being given, here's your manual and just
Yes.
use this word for word, and it'll take all the guesswork out of it. I'm thinking that's the antithesis of what it's about. As you know,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
relationships and yeah.
And I think one of the things that's a big stressor for teachers, early childhood folks, who are doing that direct care, is behavior, challenging behaviors. And I think this prepackaged curriculum or these heavy academic expectations contribute to that by making teachers feel like any behavior that's challenging for me is taking me off my script. And so I've got to just stop it. I can't understand it. I've got to just stop it. And that's a really stressful way for everybody to go through life.
So stressful. And it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And and of course, I'm just a huge believer in making sure we have wonderful natural outdoor settings for children where that kind of rich play can happen. And of course, indoors. And if the environments are, as you know, I'm just preaching to the choir here, but are set up well, then we can have those authentic relationships together with children, because we're not trying to. And I always think about, when you think about this, you're a young child, you have no choice but to be there for often long hours. And that's why I love Carol's work, where she talks about professional love. And they need to feel love. They need to have those loving relationships. They need to have people that pay attention. So that's,
and we benefit from that too, right? We benefit from having that relationship.
Yeah. The other day, I heard, I just happened to be there, doing one of those groups, and parent said to her child, the person who's with her child, "Oh, I've invited you to," she wanted to invite you to her birthday party, but, don't feel like you have to come. And she said, well, why wouldn't I come? She's my friend. And I thought, it's that kind of a relationship that, that where we may be. Yes, I love that one person was talking about seeing herself as a guide. I'm just a little farther along. I've had more experience. I'm not smarter than you are. I'm not, but I just have had more experience. I have some things I can point out to you along your journey of life. And I think I love that way of thinking about it.
Yeah, me too. Excuse me. I'm going to go back to the book specifically for a second.
Oh yeah, the book. Okay.
The book. This is how they all go. You know that. We start with the topic and we move all over the place.
That's why I love it.
Yeah. I was just looking at the back cover and what Roger wrote about the book. And he said that you're sharing daily words of inspiration, which we've kind of talked about, and also provocation, not just feel good sloganeering, but hard-won wisdom. Do you feel like it's a book of provocation also?
I hope so, because I hope that there are lots of things that encourage people to think, but it's like anything else. I don't believe anybody can say, here's what you do. It's like, these are some things that I found helpful. I invite you to think about it, but you may see it differently. Great. But then, I think it's very much the same way we are with children. It's invitations, provocations, but you take it and do with it what you will in the way that's right for you. So we're all at different places in our journey. And I've had great discussions already with people about the book who, made me think in new ways. I love that.
Yeah. I love that. I like the word. I think it's, sort of been commodified in a sense, the word provocation in early childhood.
It has.
We can't have any nice thing without.
I just saw it. Well, I won't even talk about it, but saw a book that was like packaged provocations for children. I thought,
Yeah, no,
okay.
thanks.
Well,
Yeah. But if we think about it just in terms of like a spur for
Right,
thinking
right. Sparking
or
thinking.
acting, yeah. Um, then I feel like those things also really help us if we're either prevent burnout or in a place of burnout to be challenged in that way and to be able to just pause and kind of think through what you just read and
Yeah.
okay, I agree and it's inspiring, or wait, what do I think about this? And how would this look in my life if I thought this way? I think that also can be really satisfying.
Well, it's interesting because when you said with your students, well, what does this have to do with
Yeah.
early childhood? I thought, I bet there'll be a lot of people who will say, well, if anything she could have written, why this? This isn't directly about early childhood. Like,
Yeah.
I wrote a different book about heart-centered teaching inspired by nature. That was
Hmm.
very much about children. But
Hmm.
I think to me, it has everything to do with it because the more I've really, really thought about it, um, I think that it's that continual work with ourselves about, what do I believe about life? What are the tools that I'm bringing?
Hmm.
And how can I model some of that for children? I think in early childhood, way more than any other time, um, we're sort of some of the first people besides family that are saying to them, hey, this is what I think life is like. This is
Hmm.
my experience with life. And I just feel that deep responsibility
Yeah.
of, really doing everything I can to work with myself. And I also felt that responsibility when I was working with staff, that,
Yeah.
um, but it's, and having, but children also bring that out in you. And you have, I've had some very deep conversations with children about death, and
Yeah.
it's just so interesting. And to be able to not shy away from those kinds of,
Hmm.
like I love Nick's book The Can of Worms, about
Yeah.
not shying away from uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
But to me, the biggest lessons, if you will, are, um, what's life all about?
Yeah.
How do you have a good life? And
Hmm.
why are we so focused on the only things that are important are, the academic skills? And
Letters and numbers and
but
shapes.
but aren't we sort of, there is a message out there that, oh, social emotional learning, we don't do that, we just,
Right.
and I just think we have to raise up our voices and be,
Hmm.
we don't have to fight about it, but we can just say, here's my experience.
Yeah.
This is the key to everything.
Hmm.
It's all, Inspector Vygotsky, it's all about
I was
relationships,
just
right?
thinking about
Isn't
Vygotsky.
that true though?
Yeah.
How long have we known this, that it's all about relationships,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is this kind of the stuff that we're talking about, the relationships and um, teaching them what life is like isn't measurable or marketable. You
No,
know what I
no,
mean?
right. We can't
Everyone in
put
the
it in
room
a,
might agree when we talk about it, but when it comes to policymakers or marketing to families who are pressured to make every moment uh, uh, educational, whatever. I think it's a hard sell outside of the classroom or the space. And then once we're
well,
in there with the children, it's an easier thing to talk about and sell. But when we're having these broader conversations about what's important for young children, it gets dismissed.
I'll tell you some good news. So, our Nature Explore program has worked with Los Angeles Unified School District with their
Uh-huh.
100 early childhood classrooms. And really, we created the outdoor spaces with them, but really what happened was, had a lot of these same kinds of conversations with teachers and really thought about things differently.
Uh-huh.
And they are seeing remarkable changes in, teachers aren't leaving, they're staying longer,
Uh-huh.
there's less and fewer quote behavioral
Right.
issues, and
Yes.
on and they're just saying, well, whatever this is, we want more of this, and we can't really measure it, but we see it. And
Yeah.
I think that yeah, I
And it
remember
will have a school benefit. it
Oh,
will have that
and it is.
contribution to their future academic success doing this
It is.
differently in early childhood.
They're seeing it, they're
Yeah.
seeing the benefits of it. But it's, I mean, it's a lot of why we decided to do a lot of qualitative research instead of the quantitative research,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very hard to get hard numbers. I mean, we had to do some of that to be credible with research,
Right.
but the qualitative research is what really helps you pay attention. I remember talking with Carlina Rinaldi from Reggio once,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "You Americans, you have to measure everything. Can't you just trust
Yeah.
yourself sometimes and just see it?" And I think sometimes that's true. Can't we
Yeah.
just see what really
Yeah.
works too?
And maybe it was Piaget who would talk about the American problem
Right.
when
Oh
he
my
was
gosh.
lecturing? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And
So it's not
I
a
so
new
agree.
problem
No,
necessarily.
no, no. But
Yeah.
I was thinking that, so one of the things I read a lot in the book, probably because it's always been an issue for me, but I saw it with people I worked with too, that I don't know if this, well, actually, we do see that people who choose early childhood often, score higher on the ACEs. They've had
Mm-hmm.
some issues in their own
Right.
lives, and perhaps that's been an impetus that I want to make life better for children.
Yes.
But we often have, perfectionism is an issue,
Yeah.
or, and so I write a lot about that in there, that, how do we work with that and really help ourselves get to the point of total self-acceptance? Because I'm a big believer that it's very hard to treat other people any better than we treat ourselves,
For
and
sure.
if we, the whole supporting each child as an individual is really only going to happen if we can accept ourselves totally. And
Mm.
anytime there are parts of us that we judge, well, we're going to judge that in children. We're going to, I really, if you watch and, think of all the judgments or all the things that we, say are wrong with people,
Mm-hmm.
I really think a lot of that comes from people who haven't done the work of learning to just completely accept themselves,
Yeah.
flaws and all.
Yeah, I can
So that's a big thing
testify
for
to
me.
that. Personal
Well, I mean, I think,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, we all have that. And I just, continue to think that's a really important topic for all of us to talk about together. And,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to support each other and being really honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but to me, well, that was one of the other reasons for writing the book, is to, really, well, I hope you get to some of those with your class. I'd be interested to see what
Yeah.
they say when you hit some of those things about self-acceptance and,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was trying to be really good and only read each day's on that day, but I have to just read through it. And then I can revisit them still on their right days, but I'm gonna have to just read it
Yeah,
like a
some
regular
people
book.
have done that. They just read through the whole thing as a book, and then they
Yeah.
go back and visit, or they mark the ones that, and I have some that I just keep rereading because I need to keep thinking about
Oh,
them.
nice.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I thought I had a question and it's gone. That happens to me too. Everyone knows who
Oh yeah.
listens to the show. Sometimes I just lose the rails. What else? Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about the
Well,
book or the process or?
yeah, I guess one of the things that I'm hoping is that, I love it when people sometimes send me ideas, or they see something differently, or they'll say, "Oh, I read a book about this that, might be helpful." So I just would invite people. I mean, I suppose they could do that on the Facebook page or
Yeah.
just whatever, but I love that because to me, it's like a continuing
Mm-hmm.
dialogue with each other, those of us that, especially, I mean, really, I suppose anybody can read the book, but my first audience, first and foremost, was, my early childhood friends who I
Mm-hmm.
admire so much. But,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so while I have this opportunity, I think that we're missing the mark when we create programs for children where we don't have opportunities to find ways for the adults to meet together. And
Yeah.
I just am such a believer in that
Hmm.
we've got to make that more of a priority, and
Yeah.
have to find ways to have these kinds of discussions together, because I've seen remarkable things happen because of that.
Hmm.
And the people who I started working with, gosh, literally 40 years ago,
Yeah.
this group of people, even as people have retired or gone up, has stayed as this community of
Hmm.
people. And we get together and have reunions and things, and it's just doing this kind of work is very, I mean, it really does take some support to do it
Yeah.
well, I do believe, because
Yeah.
you're having intense relationships with people all the time.
Yeah, I hear that from my students who are working in early childhood, that that feeling of being supported is missing.
Yeah.
And they might be meaning, when I say a kid can't do this, my director comes in and says, yes, you can. That could be what they're talking about. But I think what you're talking about, this the ability to have conversations together away from children, and to know that they can sort of count on that,
Yeah.
and to just be, unguarded and honest and
Unguarded and
with
honest is
with
it.
each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. And to say, boy, I really am struggling with this, and not
Hmm.
feel judged, or
Right.
I'm just, this happened, and I just wasn't sure what to do, and
Yeah.
it really triggered something inside me. Can we talk about this? And
Yeah.
I love those kinds of
Hmm.
conversations, and where we can, you know, I remember, I don't know what made me think of this, but I think, because I think these are the sorts of things that happen when you really have deep relationships with children. I happened to just be walking by one time during the pandemic, and the person I saw this happen to was outside with a group of children. They were bringing loose parts from
Hmm.
outdoors, and they were all working together, and they were creating a school, they called it. It's interesting because we don't call it a school, but I
Right.
guess they
But
know that. But
yeah.
they said to her, oh, look what we're creating, a school. And in this school, there's no pandemic. And I bet you wish you could go to that school and get away from the pandemic. And it was this lovely moment where she said, no, I don't wish that. I love being here with you because
Oh, that's
I
great.
love all of you. And I mean, she started to cry. They started to cry. It was such a heartfelt moment. And it was
Hmm.
like watching this little community where everybody was crying, because I think it was a hard time,
Sure.
but this sense of, allow. And she said to me later when we talked about that, you know what? In the past, I wouldn't have let myself cry. I would have thought, oh, you can't do that with children. But that's how I was feeling. And I was just so touched, and I just let myself cry. And I
Hmm.
said, because that
Perfect.
was real, because it's a
Yeah.
real relationship. And
Yeah.
it just, I was, I've been in places where people are instructed, you could never say I love you to a child. You could
Yes.
never show. I mean, haven't you heard that? And I think,
Absolutely. Yes, I've gotten in trouble for it.
okay, Heather, why? Why do you think? Why do
Yeah,
you think
well,
that
and this is
happens?
kind of what Carol and I ended up talking about a little bit, is this quest that we're on to be accepted as professionals and real teachers makes us tend to have these really clinical approaches. And so I think that's part of it, is that there's something weak about you, or you're not being objective and fair if you tell a child that you love them. But I think also there's this fear that the parents will feel competition, or somehow that's disruptive to the relationship with parents. I think there's a couple, but I do just think that we feel like, just like with social emotional learning and relationship based stuff, those conversations, everything that gets lumped into that soft skill category, I think that's another contributing factor to don't tell a child you love them. For
Yeah.
me, I was just being accused of having favorites at the time. I
Oh,
mean, that
oh,
was the specific reason for me when I was, um, and maybe I did. There was a little girl that no one liked, and I would take her out in the hall with me and give her piggyback rides if I had to go to the kitchen for something. And so I was playing favorites, and then I also told her I loved her.
I'm not sure that's playing favorites. I think that's just
No.
having authentic relationships.
Right.
That's what I would say. And I'd say, way to go. I mean,
Right.
but see, that's also, if we don't have these kinds of conversations, then administrators don't get this. And
yeah.
what I love is, being able to start having these sorts of conversations with administrators. I've also, some folks I know that are in administration have said, okay, I'm reading this book and it's reminding me of things, and I'm bringing it up with, just like you're doing with your students, but they're with, the community of folks that they're working with. And we're having different kinds of conversations, which makes me very happy.
That's
because
great.
I think these are the kinds of conversations that we really do need to be having. And, I was thinking, because I just am one that, okay, I'm not accepting the conventional wisdom. I'm just not.
Right.
We just have to do something different. I think, we need, and you're doing this with your podcast, but we need a lot of us who really get this to really raise our voices up even more. And I almost have a whole new definition. I don't want to compete with elementary teachers. There's no need for competition. I mean, we're all doing something very important, but this is a unique way of being with children in the early childhood years. It's almost like we all need to celebrate ourselves as developmentalists or something, or developmental guides, or come up.
I love that word. Yeah.
I really think it's just so important to just figure out a way to really make our voices even louder. I really think that's important, and to have more and more people understand that, and the importance of the uniqueness of this time of life. And, so
yeah,
I'm on a mission to see if we can all do that together.
Amazing. Well, you have my full support.
Well, you're
for the mission.
You're doing a lot. I have to tell you, so your podcast is a great thing to discuss. And some of these conversations with teachers, I've asked them to listen to a certain podcast, and then we've had conversations. And I mean, that's a great way to use your podcast. We also used your article that you wrote for Exchange about quit tattling on children.
Yeah, one of my favorites. Yeah,
I love it. But, so I just have to tell a quick story that one of the young men who's, working with children now, was diagnosed with autism and on the autism spectrum scale. And even as a young child, he was one of the first that I worked very hard with inclusion before it was the thing to do yet. And, so he used to talk about as a child that someday he was going to teach where he is now. And so he's been hired as a teacher, and has a very concrete way of looking at the world, which has been great in these conversations. But with that quit tattling on children, he said, every day I say something to parents in front of their child so they can hear something really that I love about them.
I love it.
Thought, it's just, and he said, because I needed people, to say things about me that were, and I thought, that's just, I love that. It was just this sense of, that, and the other thing that I'm just such a believer in is sharing who we truly are with children. So I know I'm just telling you things you already believe.
Someone listening maybe needs to hear it.
But I think that we don't. It's the antithesis of everything being homogenized and everybody doing the same thing. Every group of children is going to be different, because if the adults in there really bring themselves in and their interest in there, it's going to be a little different experience, because you're a fluid group and you're part of the group. And really, I remember very, very early on, and I think I wrote about this in the book, when I was a very young director, I talked about, okay, let's start out by telling each other what some of our great qualities are, what you're really proud of yourself. And oh my gosh, Heather, it
Did
was
they
hard for people
struggle?
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And finally someone said, can I just tell you what I'm working on? I said, well, let's talk about this. But I said, but I get it. I get it. I was a kid that was told, don't blow your own horn, don't
Right.
get a big head. I was told that.
Yeah.
But if we can't celebrate ourselves and feel good about ourselves, how do we expect the children we're working with to be able to do that? And so a lot of it has been, really helping people learn to celebrate their uniqueness, be okay with mistakes, try to let perfectionism go. I'm still a work in progress.
It's so hard.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It is. But
Yeah.
it's our work, that's part of what we're doing. So and helping and sharing some of those things with children. When I run into people that I worked with years ago who are adults now, I just ran into someone who said, oh, do you remember when you told us that story about how you were making your lunch and you put your keys in the refrigerator and you couldn't find them and that's why you were late? And I said, no, but he said, I do. I've always thought about that story. And just that one human being to another kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good story. Well, we're coming up on an hour, Nancy. How did that happen?
Oh, I just could talk to you forever. But I just want to say, Heather, thank you so much for what you're doing. These conversations, and for some people, listening to a podcast is a really great way for them. They're that kind of learner that would like to listen. And I just love it that it's a resource that's available. But I do want you to write a book based on all of,
I'm trying.
Or more than one book, maybe it's a series of books, but you have a lot.
I have the ideas. I don't have the discipline is what I'm finding. Like I used to have some real workaholic tendencies. If I had started this 10 years ago, I'd have 4 books done already, but
I think it's better not to write
That's how I try to frame it.
That's what I said to Exchange. I don't give me a deadline. I'll just sit and kind of write it till it's done. And that's a good way to do things, I think. So
So you mentioned if people wanted to get a hold of you, they could comment on the Facebook page, which is Encouragement Every Day. But do you have like an email or some other way for people to send their ideas to you, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I could just give them my email.
Yeah.
You want me just to say it?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just my personal email, nancy.rosenow1@outlook.com.
Okay.
So I'd love to hear from people.
Yeah, and what I'm learning is that people aren't on Facebook as much as they used to be.
No, they aren't as much.
Yeah.
But so somebody the other day just told me about this wonderful book called Wounded by School. And I mean, I could talk about that too, but
Did you just share it with me on Facebook too?
I think so. I
on
think
another
I did.
post. Yeah. I was like, I just put that in my wish list.
Yeah. It's so good. And it's just another reminder of why it's the emotional things we're doing with children that are absolutely crucial in the early years. So I recommend that. Highly.
Thanks. So again, your book is called Encouragement Every Day, and people can order it from Exchange Press. And if you use the code ECE Nerd, you can get 15% off.
Oh, thanks, Heather.
So, I just appreciate Exchange doing that for the listeners for giving them that little bit of a discount. Well, thanks so much, Nancy. This was wonderful.
Thanks,
and
Heather.
I hope we get to talk again soon.
Oh, I hope so too. I love talking to you. I could have gone on and on forever. So.
That's me too, obviously. Yeah. Okay. I finally looked at the clock and I was like, it felt like 20 minutes.
Thanks. This is great. Yeah. And keep doing what you're doing, because, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's so important.
I appreciate that. I love to do what I'm doing. If I can, get myself motivated to do all the lead up steps to the actual recording. So thank you again. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.